Hi, Tom Kofer with OnPoint Consulting. Here today to share with you something we're very excited about in terms of sharing these individual recorded learning sessions that came about from our highly successful and free OnPoint Sage 300 CRE web conference attended by Sage 300 users all over the country. We had 10 great web learning sessions over a 2-day period. They were extremely well attended and wanted to pass them on to you really as part of our ongoing commitment and continuing commitment to Sage 300 users and to you, our customers. This session really addresses ODBC for Microsoft Excel specifically. Around best practices and key learning objectives that focused on advanced ODBC and Excel techniques to quickly extract data from your Sage system and update your WIP Microsoft Excel spreadsheets for faster month-end reporting. We know that a lot of you take information out of Sage and reinvent the wheel pretty much month to month in a WIP schedule, but I think we can show you some techniques that will really help improve speed on that. You know, we are able to deliver this successful webinar series and others in the future because of OnPoint's deep pool of very experienced senior Sage 300 CRE consultants, trainers, software developers, custom report writer developers, and other partnerships with like-minded companies that improve the use of your Sage software. In addition to the support, training, and consulting services, we also provide what we call a Sage 300 optimization or business process review. And that's really helped to determine if your Sage software can be enhanced, extended, and you'll be able to use it for a few years and grow with it, or should it be replaced? And that question is coming up a lot these days. You know, we've helped hundreds of Sage CRE users over the past 30 years, and we're really hope to help you gain the maximum use of your software and extend the life of your investment. Bottom line, we're here to help. And if you find this webinar helpful, please like or share us on Facebook and LinkedIn. And you can also find more information about OnPoint at onpoint-software.com. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoy the session with our compliments, and stay well, friends.
Well, welcome everybody. Appreciate you taking the time with us today. I have to say this is an interesting topic for me, and I'm looking forward to teaching this. This can get a little complicated, and one of the reasons is it's such a crucial part of our revenue recognition process and our accounting process if we're in accounting or we're in construction. And I think, at least in my experiences, there's a lot that we can do to help automate and fine-tune the process to hopefully try to get us through that WIP process that we have at the end of each month. So with that being said and done, how I'd like to normally start every class, and as I did the last one, is number one, I'd like to tell you a little bit about me, just so that you know sort of the perspective I'm coming from. Then what we're going to do is we're going to find out a little bit about you, because I want to know a little bit about your experience and the perspective you're coming from. We'll kind of do a quick overview of the class. And then what we'll do is we are actually going to work on an example of a month-end work in process schedule where most of the information is actually being automatically populated using ODBC. So it is not totally automated, but it is helping us put a lot of the information in so that we can kind of get rid of some of the drudgery that we have in this. So first off, my name is Mike Savecki. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. I am treasurer for Briar Hill Associates. We're a real estate development firm. I am an end user. I'm not a consultant or a certified consultant. And as I brought up my last class, one of the reasons that I bring that out is that I've been around the block. I've been a Sage user for 23 years, and I've been teaching this for 17. But normally when I'm trying to approach any of this course material, I'm approaching it from a very practical standpoint. Nothing is theoretical. Normally, if I'm showing it to you, it is something that we are really using in our day-to-day operations. And we're very much, we've got to get from point A to point B kind of thing. So I like to think I could speak with some authority that most of what I'm showing you, I know it works because it works for us. Hopefully some or part of it will be helpful to you. So in order to teach this, I want to find out a little bit about who's in the audience here. So there were some questions actually that I gave to Barclay, and I think we're going to do a quick poll just so I can find out a little bit about you and your experience level. And then what we're going to do is I will see if I can sort of maneuver the course material to, work with the most number of people. And
Okay.
Barclay, you're going to have to read me again I can't see the poll, so you'll have to read me the instruction or the results.
Sure. The first question we have up is, how would you rate your knowledge of ODBC? And we'll give people just, if you just should be able to just select a button and then click submit at the bottom of the page. So 57% are no experience or a complete beginner. 14% have some prior experience. And 29% say they are an advanced user. So the next question is, how does your company process month-end work month-end work in process? I think I mistyped that. Anyway, completely in Sage, outside of Sage, and both. All right, I don't see any more votes coming in, so share those results. 0 completely in Sage, 33% outside of Sage, and 67% both. And lastly, if you work in process outside of Sage, how do you enter data? Entirely or mostly by hand, using ODBC, using Event One Office Connector, or using another third-party program? All right, I'll go ahead and close that. 100% of the people said entirely or mostly by hand.
Okay. Well, I can unequivocally say that if we have 100% of people that are putting it by hand, we will get some benefit out of this class. So one of the things I have noticed here, so 57% of our users have had no ODBC experience. So I will tell you up front, there are going to be large portions of this class that you're not going to get because you at least have to have some basic understanding of how ODBC works. Okay, so what I want you to do is, I'm really here more to show you a concept, and you should be able to follow along. One of the challenges, which we're going to talk about in a second, is there is such a wide variety of the way that people do WIP that it's very hard to come up with a standard solution for it. But what I'm going to show you here is I'm going to highlight some of the big issues that we run into when we're doing this. And those will apply whether you use ODBC or not, or whether you use a third party or not. And for our advanced users, then we're going to see our goal here is to see what we can do to make the process a little less painful. So if we take a look at, one of the things they asked us officially at the beginning of each of these classes is if we, and actually, hold on a quick second here while I figure out how this works. Our learning objective is learn how ODBC can be used to produce and reconcile month-end WIP back into Sage 300, including specific challenges and reconciling job costs to GL. So a little background on how this course developed. As I mentioned before, I work for a real estate development company. We do a lot of stuff. We do shopping centers, we do land development, buildings, homes. We're kind of like a hand grenade. We're all over the place. And we originally started on Sage back in 1997. And one of the things that we quickly learned was real estate developers, we use the job cost module completely different than construction companies. Very often we're using it to track cost in buckets, and those costs are going to balance sheets. We're self-constructing assets. We don't have a traditional month-end WIP process. And as we started to develop out over the years, we started to get into more standardized construction, as example, home building. And so it occurred to us at one point in time that we had to start, at least for a certain element of our companies, we needed to start running the WIP process in a more traditional fashion, because we had jobs that we had to account for either on percentage of completion or completed contracts. Now, I am a firm believer that the world is full of people that are far smarter than me and basically don't reinvent the wheel. So the first thing I always try to do when I am faced with something like this is I try to go out and find out what people that are brighter and smarter than me are doing as far as WIP. So the story happened maybe about 10 years ago. I've been a teacher with the Sage Users Group for 17 years. And in the process of 17 years, there are a number of companies that come every year, and you quickly determine that there are some people out there that really seem like they're sharp. So I spent a good week, I would say, talking to, it was somewhere between 12 and 15 different companies, most of which were large GCs, some heavy highway, one or two specialty guys. And these were all people that, companies where I'd met the people and they seemed like they were pretty sharp folks. They seemed like they had really thought their processes through. And, I basically asked them, how are you guys processing your month-end WIP? And I have to tell you, I was absolutely amazed at sort of the response that I got back. And I will tell you that if you ever think that you're dissatisfied with your WIP process and that you're the only person out there that is, it is by far the most common complaint that I heard in this process. I really didn't have anybody that was truly happy with it. We did have some people that had it basically fine-tuned. But I also have to tell you, we had plenty of people that was an absolute train wreck. No integration, lots of manual entry, lots of arguing with property managers or project managers. It was just basically a chorus of people being unhappy. So one of the things that we really tried to do is we tried to look at what was causing the process to fail and what we can do to improve it. So the first thing we learned was this, and there's a great quote I have. I'm bringing it up on the screen right now. This is my work in process words to live by. And it's a quote from Bill Gates, and it goes like this. The first rule of any technology used in business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. The second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. And I'm not a big quotes guy, but if there is ever anything in my mind that sums up some of the issues that we run into work in process, this really does it. What we can do in fine-tuning our work in process is we can get certain elements of it that require a lot of input, and we can apply ODBC and some other tools to it to make it much less labor intensive, a lot less, take the drudgery out of it. But no matter how good we are, if our information flow isn't good, if we're not getting the information timely, then we are going to have difficulty ever producing things in a way we're going to be satisfied for. Most of the time, that is going to be a disconnect between your property managers and your management, and your property managers and your accounting staff. Okay. So the one thing I do want to point out is I'm recognizing that efficiency. We're really not going to address that portion of it in this class. I'm going to be dealing basically with the production of the WIP schedule. But I do want you to realize that we have to be careful of the fact that technology is not going to solve an ineffective workflow. So at some point in time, and I'm going to show you some things at the end of the class that maybe we can do to help with the PM workflow, okay? But generally, getting this data is the challenge. I like to think we've now worked with it to the point, and what I'm going to show you is once we get the data, I think that what we can do from an accounting standpoint is we can use ODBC and some correct structure to help automate the actual production of the work schedule and do our bookings back into Sage, okay? So some of the things that we were looking at, okay, which is how we process Sage, okay? So what we were saying, and this is not surprising, was 0% of the folks on this call said that they were doing processing inside of Sage. And what is the problem with that? Why aren't most people doing it? Well, typically what we have found out is it's because of the miscellaneous worksheet function in job cost. In order for us to put this information in, there is no import feature, so we cannot import it in, at least natively. And if you try to actually use the import screens, if you probably know, they're a hot mess. They just don't work very well. Yeah. And that's the biggest issue. If there was a bigger interface and you were allowed to import stuff in, then probably you could do it within Sage. Now, there is the capability of importing using the Event One Office connector actually has a specific project. They're the only people that I'm aware of that they actually do now have an API that will write into miscellaneous worksheets. So you can actually now, if at some point in time you really do want to do all your processing in Sage, there actually is a tool available to that. I don't know a whole lot of people that are doing it. At least the last conferences that I've attended and people I've chatted with, it's not widely implemented yet. And so I have not really gotten, for lack of a better word, I haven't gotten the warm and fuzzies on it, that it is really going to be something that I think is a good long-term effect. But it is absolutely it's absolutely an available product. Their other products are very good, so that is something that may be a possibility, okay? So if we're going outside of Sage, my tendency has been, when I've chat with other people, most people that I've talked to are using Excel. And most people are using Excel and they're either running a series of reports every month out of job costs. They're running their contracts and they're running their job to date costs and their billings and things like that. And they are manually inputting them into Excel. Okay, and then they're adding their cost, projected cost and their additional information within Excel. So there's a lot of manual entry in it. I do find a couple people that have been using Access. Very few people using Access just natively. It doesn't really lend itself to this particular task. There is a third-party software called from Cabbage software that is an Access-based work and process system. They've been demonstrating at some of the conferences. Seems like it's an interesting piece of software. It's not very widely used right now, but there is an Access third-party software out there that does it. I have run into quite a bit of people that are using Office Connector to actually, with Excel, to actually produce their WIP schedules. And it's very, very similar to what I'm going to show you right now. And it is possibly a strong tool if you own Office Connector. It is absolutely one of the tools that I would look at as using it. The only hesitation I have with Office Connector, and we will talk about it a little bit later in the webinar, is when you design a WIP schedule with Office Connector, you have to, if you have a lot of jobs, you have to be very careful on how you structure it, because if you structure it with lots of Office Connector functions, it will slow the performance down significantly. And when I say significantly, the refreshes could take, 10 or 15 minutes significantly on large schedules. And there's nothing wrong with the Office Connector product. It's just not being implemented correctly. So I have seen some of that. The one thing that I have noticed in talking with people and in going over this is that most people have taken the, as an example, with Office Connector, you can, because they have this special Office Connector import, they can actually import the data back into Sage. But what I have found, at least my own personal experience in talking to people, is most people are not doing that. I think most people have taken the assumption that if they've taken it out of Sage and they've been accounting for it out of Sage, they're not going to bother to put it back into Sage. Okay, whether that's wise or not, I don't know. We don't, but I can tell you that seems to be, in my own informal poll, that seems to be what I'm finding out there. Okay, so before I continue any further, do you have any questions or comments from anyone?
There are no questions at this time.
Okay, so what I would like to do is I'm going to give you a very, very basic overview of what we're going to do. We're going to kind of walk through it on the slides, and then what we're going to do is we're actually going to go over to a workbook, and I'm going to show you what the end product looks like. I'm going to show you how we build it. Okay, we're not going to have enough time to build it all in an hour and 45 minutes, but I'm going to show you the basic concepts and the stepping stones that we use. Okay, so first, let's just give a quick work paper overview. Okay, so normally your standard month-end workflow typically has at least 3 processes to it. The first is somebody's got to assemble and calculate the individual, the required information on a job level. Somebody's got to look at the jobs, either the PMs or management or somebody with knowledge, superintendents, and we have to have sort of this individual collection process. And it's my experience that that tends to be where the little wheels fall off the wagon. Okay, some companies are better than others. Most have some challenges there. We always have those great superintendents that hate paperwork. Okay, what I concentrate on, because it's my world, are the 2 that are in green. We have to get this, and we have to produce a summary WIP schedule. Okay, and more importantly, I wrote all of this material from a bean counter standpoint. I want to be able to produce this WIP schedule so that I can reconcile all these balances back to my GL, and that I can produce the period end journal entries. Okay, so there's really 2 parts of what I'm going to be showing you: assembling and producing the WIP schedule, and then reconciling the WIP back to the GL. Now, if at some point in time we're going through this and you get lost and it's getting over your head, what I'm going to point out is the very first part, the assembling and producing the summary WIP schedule, is the easier part of what I'm going to show you here. So if all you can take away from what I'm going to show you is this first part, then I think that we probably have had a good day, because most of the time what I'm going to try to show you is that you can get most of that information from Sage without having to retype it in. Okay. The reconciling WIP is it's secondary. It's still very important, but you can do the first without having the second. Okay. So the example I'm going to show you, I tried to come up with one. Obviously I can't use the one that we use in our company because it's highly customized. And that was sort of the challenge that we were going to do when we originally developed this material. Is I wanted to come up with something to show the concepts that basically would fit most people. So the example I have is a very generic example, and it would probably be something that would be good for somebody that, let's say, had between 50 to 100 jobs open at the end of every month. Okay. If you're somebody that's a service and you have hundreds of jobs a month, we would have to modify this and automate it much more, because there is some manual entry to this. Okay. And it's very hard to fully automate these unless you really know the nuances of all the systems. Okay. The second thing I was going to point out is I wrote these examples from an accounting viewpoint. So very often when I see materials, I see things that are being generated, reports that are being generated that go to the project manager. But those may not necessarily be something that I can tie back into my general ledger. I need something that when we do it, it's going to tie out to my period end. Okay. The third thing is this particular one, just to keep it a little easier, because there's a lot of stuff we have to cover in this, I've done it using what I call a bucket approach versus a transaction approach. And what the bucket means is that the most of the transaction amounts are coming from the accumulation fields on the job records. They're not coming from the transaction files. Now, if it was to come from the transaction file, we could actually run this particular report at any given date of any given month, okay? And we could also process it at any given point in time. If we're using the bucket approach, then there are going to be some restrictions on this. Because we're using the bucket, this has to be processed as part of the month end, okay? So this assumes that you are actually doing your work in process processing following the month end in the month. So if we're doing April, we're doing this in May, okay? And it assumes that you are closing the GL and the job cost month ends at the same time, okay? So that you're not rolling your job cost module forward before you're rolling your GL module forward, okay? Now, you can still do it, but we would have to adjust the formulas. So I had to come up with some very basic assumptions. Probably I'm going to guess that last one is the one that would cause some people the most gastric distress, because some people, their job cost people like to roll the job cost module really early, okay, because of some reporting issue, okay. So these are the basic, when I wrote this, this is what I'm hanging my hat on, okay. Okay, so any questions at this point?
Doesn't seem there are any questions right now.
Okay. Okay, so now let's start getting into the weeds a little bit. And once again, I apologize. I don't like sitting inside a job. I hate doing PowerPoints, but we do have to talk a little bit about basic structure. Now, we had 57% of the class that has no knowledge of ODBC, so we're going to start losing some of you right now. But one of the things I want to point out is when I'm doing more advanced things in ODBC, one of the things that I'm doing is I typically have a workbook structure that I use, okay? And we're gonna get into this in a little more detail. But generally, my workbook structures are almost always based like this, okay? I have several worksheets, and what I'm doing with the worksheets is I am using ODBC, and I'm just bringing in raw data. I'm bringing it in from Sage, or I'm bringing it in from somewhere else, okay? So you're gonna see in the example that I have a sheet that brings in the current open jobs. I have another sheet that brings in GL balances. I have another sheet that brings in the period information, so that it lets me know, what period the job cost module is set in and what period the GL is set in, okay? So we have a bunch of sheets, and we can have as many as we need. Now, if you're a beginner in ODBC, very often what happens, and the mistake that you made, is you try to actually base your reports straight off of those sheets. And it's very, very difficult to work with them, which I'm going to show you shortly. And the reason is because the sheets, because they are live data, they're constantly changing size. Tables will expand and they will contract based upon the amount of active data in the system. And because of that, it's very hard sometimes to write things on those tables because they're constantly moving. What instead we do is we will get that data and we are going to roll it forward. And we're going to roll it forward into a bunch of optional calculation sheets. And the primary purpose of that is to get this data that expands and contracts and makes it more static. It makes it more always the same size, always the same shape, so that we can apply formulas to it, okay? We're going to get to that once again on the next slide. And then generally what we're doing is we're using those sheets and we're pulling stuff forward into a final report. And so in this case, there's going to be 3 final reports. There's going to be a WIP schedule that's going to actually show us our WIP. There's going to be a reconciliation schedule that's going to look at what's in job cost and what's in GL, and it's going to let us know whether the two agree. Because we can't produce a journal entry unless our debits equal our credits. If we've got $1 million of current cost and job costs, then we better have $1 million of general costs somewhere on our balance sheet or our income statement, or we're never going to be able to produce the journal entry. Okay. And so generally this is, if you look at any of the stuff that we work with, this is how we generally structure it. If you're using Office Connector can actually interface in any 3 of these levels, okay? I don't have Office Connector in this example. We can talk about it if people have any questions more later on in the class, okay? So generally keep in mind as we're going through this exercise, this is how I have this workbook structured. Okay? The other thing that you're going to see is there are some Excel functions and there are some Excel features that you really need to know how to use. And I'm not saying this strictly from the WIP process. As you start to get more advanced with ODBC, you're going to find out that there are some, very few of them, but you're going to find out that there are some functions that we're going to use again and again and again and again. The good news is they're not that hard to learn, and there's not that many of them. The first feature that we have to learn to use are tables. Okay, and starting with Excel 2007, when we link data to Sage and we bring it into Excel, it embeds that link in an Excel table. Now, if you've never worked with an Excel table before, a table is like a range on steroids. It's a range that has a lot of built-in functions to it. And they let us do neat things. And one of the things that they let us do is they let us do something called structured table referencing, which lets us to refer to tables by names and their parts instead of by a cell address. Now, the reason that this is very important in concept is, let's just take as an example that 1 month we are going to bring over all of our jobs and we're going to link them and we're going to bring them into Excel. And let's just say that in that particular month, we have 10 jobs, okay? So if I were to go write a sum formula and I were to point to those 10 cells and say, I want you to add up all the costs, it would add up all the costs for those 10 rows, okay? Let's say that I had a column that was called job the day cost, and I added up all 10 values in that column. Well, what happens next month when I refresh that column? Well, maybe we've got some more jobs. And maybe now that job has 20 rows in it. I have 20 values in that column. Well, the problem is my formula is not going to work anymore. My formula is only pointing to 10 of the cells. What I need my formula to do is I need my formulas to be smart. I need my formulas to be able to figure out how big the table is and adjust themselves accordingly. And we can do that by using structured table referencing, and you're going to see that in this example. So in this example, because I'm using structural table referencing, I don't ever use a cell address in my formula. I just say, I want you to go over to the jobs table, and I want you to add up everything in the job the day cost column. I don't care if it's one row, I don't care if it's 1,000 rows. And it will always add up correctly because I'm using structured table referencing. Okay, so it's a very powerful tool. The second thing is what's called calculated table columns. And calculated table columns are basically these smart columns that you build into tables. And they're formulas, and they act the same way the structured table referencing does. They will copy themselves for any additional new rows that you add to the table. So if I add up 2 columns in a table and I put it in a third column, and my table grows, it will automatically copy those columns all the way down to the new rows. So it's a way to make sure that I always have a formula in every row. Okay, so table functions are kind of important when you do this. Okay, if you've never seen them, we're gonna walk through them in the worksheet. Okay. And then if I had to give 3 functions that everybody in the world should know, okay, as a matter of fact, I would say you should get one of these tattooed on your right arm, one on your left hand, left arm, and one wherever else you want. It's these 3 functions: the VLOOKUP function, the SUMIF function, and the text function. And what the VLOOKUP function does is it looks at a table and it looks down the first column of the table until it finds a value. And then it goes over and it returns a value from another column. And so it's a lookup. It says, I want you to go down the job table for a specific job number. And then when you find that job number, I want you to return the job to date cost for that number, the revised contract number for that, the month to date cost for that. It's a way that we can retrieve data from a table that is continually moving. SUMIF does the same thing, but it does a slightly different thing. SUMIF adds up data in a table where the data occurs more than once, and we want to just add up something that meets a certain criteria. So in an example like this, I want to go down a row of cost codes and I want to add up all of my concrete cost codes, but only if the job number is 03-001. Otherwise, I don't want to add it up. And the final one is the text function, which you're going to see. The text function is we use it to format and pretty text up so that it will change the title on all of our statements every month so that we don't have to retype everything and say WIP as of March 31st, WIP as of June 30th, WIP as of August. We use it to actually build the actual strings that we use to describe our schedules. Okay. Go. So kind of a lot to get into, but I kind of do need to explain. So the structure of the workbook and table functions and these 3 Excel functions, you're going to see them a lot in what I show you, and they're very important. And if you learn how to use them, they are very, very powerful tools. Okay. So from a theoretical standpoint, all the gobbledygook, this basically is the stuff, the theory behind what I'm going to show you. So from this point forward now, we're actually going to talk about and actually get to take a look at what we're going to do. So before I shrink my screen, do we have any questions or comments at this point?
There are no questions.
Okay, I should have had you do a poll saying, have I completely lost you or not? Because I understand on some of this is a lot to handle, especially if you've never been exposed to ODBC. So let's go and take a look at what I'm doing here. I am going to, if I can, I'm going to back out of this. And when I typically get into an example that is this elaborate, I actually have learned over the years what I try to do is I try to do it in 2 different formats. So you'll see right here I have a complete and I have a template version of this exercise. So let's take a look at what the completed product looks like. Okay. Okay. So what I have here is I have a workbook that is a sample month-end WIP schedule. Okay. And a couple things, normally in my worksheets, okay, if something is colored, in this case it's colored blue, blue is something that you're entering data into, okay? If it's not colored, then generally it's something that is being calculated, okay? So you can see as an example, if I go to projected cost here for the Northwest Food Warehouse, that is actually a value. But if we go over here, you're gonna see that's a formula. It's actually a VLOOKUP formula, okay? All of this stuff is formulas, okay? As an example, then, when you go to actually do this work in process, what you're going to do is you only need to put in the job number. You'll need to put in the projected cost number that you've assembled for that job. And you will have to, which we'll talk about, you will have to put your prior month totals that are coming forward from your prior month, which typically are not a big issue, okay? And your prior year totals. Everything else on this entire sheet is actually coming over from Sage. It's actually being generated automatically. There is no re-input needed. Okay. And what it's doing is it's actually going back and it's looking at this schedule. This is all the stuff that is coming over from Sage. And we're going to go over how you build this. All I'm doing is bringing this data over and I'm pulling it forward to this sheet. Okay. And if I have to add a job or delete a job, all I've got to do is go here and change it, and it will change it. Okay. Okay. So it's a very quick way of taking care of your WIP. Okay. This is the first sheet. So remember in my diagram, I said we had kind of the finish sheets. The second sheet is my active job sheet. And what this does is this compares what I have in my job schedule. So in this case, my job schedule is saying that my current month billings were $163,455.80, and my year-to-date billings were $1,053,730.80. Okay, if I'm going to do my reconciliation in the way that it's set up in the sample data, it feeds into two separate GL accounts. It feeds into account 10-0-4001 and 21-4001. So what I want you to do is I want you to go out and I want you to get the balance for those two accounts. And I want you to compare them to that. And I want to tell me if there's an issue. Okay. Because I can't do a journal entry until I can verify that my billings and job costs meet my billings and GL. Likewise, when it comes to cost, according to jobs, my current costs were $314,000 and my year-to-date costs were $1,090,000. And those feed all into, there's a whole bunch of them in the sample data. This is all the activity in those accounts, okay? I need it to actually balance out. By the way, in the process of doing this, you'll notice that there's an adjustment down here. If you actually look at the Sage sample data, it's out of balance with the general ledger by $2,305, okay? So what this would do is this would flag you in the event that your job cost does not equal your GL, okay? Then the third step then is it produces your journal entry. It says, this is your unadjusted balance based on what's in your GL. This is your adjusted balance based on what is inside the WIP schedule. You have to make $172,624.70 debit entry, credit entry, credit entry, debit entry, and my checksum. It's not going to work in this particular case because I haven't refreshed the data, but the checksum will show up to be 0. Okay, and it produces the journal entry for you. Okay, so this is generally the concept of what we use. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a look and see how we do this. So one of the things that we've got, and I'm going to flip back. These were the schedules where everything was being recapped. And then what I have back here at the end is I've got some other sheets. And these are just my raw data sheets. We're going to go over how you do this. I'm bringing my raw data back from job cost. I'm bringing back my cost numbers. I'm also going to job cost, and I want to bring back what the current period month date is in job cost. Okay. Now, I don't need to do this. The only thing that I actually have to have is this schedule. If this is the only schedule I ever learned how to write, I can produce this schedule. Okay. These other ones are only being used in the reconciliation. The next one brings back all of my current period balances for all my general ledger accounts. It brings back my current month balances and my year-to-date balances so that I can tie my numbers out. Okay. And then what it does is it lets me know what date my general ledger is set to, just so I can verify that in this case, if you remember the previous sheet, job cost was sent to May and general ledger is also sent to May. So I know that my periods line up. Okay. So let's take a little bit of look and find out. I'm gonna shrink this, and we're gonna go back quickly here, and we're gonna take a look at the here we go. And just bear with me for a second. I absolutely hate PowerPoint because I never actually use it day to day. Okay, so how do we build our WIP schedule? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a table, and we're going to bring back some job balances, and we're going to bring back a table, and we're going to name it. And the table is going to be active jobs. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring back for each job, we're going to bring back the job name, the job number, and we're going to bring back some amounts. Okay, and we're going to talk about the amounts because that's where we start to get a little tricky. The other thing we have to do is that when we bring jobs back, we're not bringing all the jobs back. We're only bringing back certain jobs. Because if we brought all the jobs back, it wouldn't necessarily tie out to our general ledger. We have to only bring back the jobs that are affecting the general ledger. So we have to filter for the correct jobs to bring back. Okay. The other table was, I had one that was called job cost control, and all that did is that brought back the current job month. That was it. Doesn't really do anything more fancy than that. Just lets you know what month the job module is set to for reconciliation purposes. I then brought GL information back into two tables. I have one called GL accounts, and that just brings back all my GL accounts and what their current balances are. I'm going to use that for my reconciliation. And then I have one called GL company that retrieves my company name and my current accounting period for my WIP schedule. Okay. So we bring those over, then we slice and dice them, what I call a slice and dice. What we're doing is I am pulling that job information forward to the WIP schedule, which we will see in a second. And the only thing I should have to do is manually update my projected cost. And at that point, it should give me my correct WIP schedule for the month. Okay. The GL recap schedule, which we talked about, pulls my job and my GL balances forwards, and it compares them just to make sure that my activity and job cost matches my activity in GL. And then the WIP schedule just gets all that information and it creates the WIP entry. Okay. Now there's some fine tuning that we're going to put on it. The first one is we're going to use a function called COUNTIF, because one thing we are going to have to flag is for new jobs, because for new jobs, we're going to have to add a line item for them every month. Okay. It will automatically copy all the data for them, but we have to do a line item. I'm going to show you how that works. And if we have time, I'll tell you a little bit about how you do this in Office Connector, but I don't know if we're going to get there because I think we have, let's see, we have until 3:45 your time, which is 4:45 my time. So we'll see how far we get with it. Okay. So as far as an overview is concerned, I understand that's kind of a lot. So what we're going to do, if nobody has any questions, is we're going to start slicing and dicing this. We'll go really slow. And what I'm going to do is I am going to use, for an example, I have a template here. And what the template does is it's that exact thing that I just showed you, but it doesn't have any of the fields filled in. I have everything formatted, so it all looks nice and pretty, okay? But it actually doesn't have anything on it, okay? And what we're gonna do is, you guys are gonna kind of follow along as I build this, okay? So, before we start getting into the nuts and bolts, anybody have any questions so far?
There doesn't seem to be any questions at this time.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to skip these right now, and we're going to go and we're going to create a new worksheet. Okay. Now, for those of you that have never had any ODBC experience whatsoever, I do apologize. This is going to be completely foreign to you, but just kind of follow along and know that you can do it. So what I've done is I've already set up a DSN that goes back to the Timberline construction sample data. So I now have a pipeline that goes to that data that will refresh with new data every time I hit refresh, data refresh in Excel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that DSN and I'm going to create a query to go out and get my job information. So let's go do that. I'm going to go to data, get data from other sources, from Microsoft Query. I'm going to go all the way down to the DSN I set up for the last class, which was construction sample data. If you remember from the last class, ODBC respects security in Sage so that I can't see anything I'm not allowed to see. So in order for me to get to the data, I've got to put in my Sage credentials. And I'm going to go over and I'm going to go down to the master job table. Okay. And if you remember on master job, if you came from the last class, the job table is huge in Sage. It's got just hundreds of fields. It's so big in fact that it shows up as two separate tables. Okay. They're both coming from the same place, but generally the first table will have all the major job stuff on it. And most of what is on the second table is stuff that is related to extras. See all the stuff that has extras in front of it, okay? And that's going to become very important in just a second. So I've got a question for you. We're going to bring back a very simple query, job description, okay? And what I want to do is I want to bring back job to date costs, okay? Right there. I'm going to bring this back to you. And I'm going to pose a question to you. Okay, so I just brought back my job description, job to date cost. I'll format it just so it looks pretty. Okay, because we're all about pretty. And I'm going to add actually a total for it so that it adds up the totals for all my costs. Okay. There you go. And for those of you that aren't familiar with ODBC, this is a live link. So what happens is if I go here, if I were to erase all this data, it doesn't make a difference because all I got to do is go back and refresh. It will always bring back the latest and greatest data for me. Okay, so the first question I typically ask when we're teaching this in the class is, if I was going to create a WIP schedule, is this the number I want to use? Obviously, I've got to know my job to date cost to produce my calculation. Is this the correct number to use? And the answer is no, it is not the correct number to use. And why is it not the correct number to use? The reason is that job to date cost also includes future costs. This particular field doesn't stop accumulating based on your current job month end. It keeps accumulating. So in order for you to get the job to date cost for accounting purposes, what I have to do is I have to make sure that that cost number, if I'm trying as an example to reconcile to the end of April, I have to make sure that nothing is posted in May so far that has increased that job to cost number. So as a result, I need to get another column. I'm going to go back to table. I'm going to go edit my query. Okay. And I'm going to go back to the job table and I'm going to look for, I'm going to go all the way back down, lots of tables, so this takes a little while sometimes, guys. I'm going to go back to job and what I'm going to look for is next month's cost. There is also a field called next month's cost. And you can see actually we have one job that actually has some costs that are included in job to date cost that actually came from next month. So if I'm going to do my reconciliation for accounting purposes, what I have to do is I have to subtract this number from here to get my adjusted balance. And how I can do that, because this is coming in an Excel table, is I can use it, do a calculated column. And a calculated column works like this. And I'm actually going to do this on purpose. I'm going to delete some rows here. Okay. I'm going to delete some rows just to show something. Now remember, it doesn't make a difference whether I deleted any rows, because when I go to refresh this, it's going to add them all back. Okay, because it's a live link back in the data. But I'm going to delete these rows to show you a concept. We had talked a little bit about these calculated columns that you use in a table. Okay, and how calculated columns work is if I go to the very first row of a table and I go over to the first blank cell that is immediately to the right of the first row, and I write a formula that it considers to be a smart formula, it will then always write and maintain that formula for any future row in the table and any row that you delete. So if I say I want you to get my job to date cost, and I want you to take out my next month cost, you see how it kind of copied everything down. Okay. Now, I'm going to format this because I format everything just instinctively. Okay. So if you remember, there were some jobs that I deleted. Remember a couple of jobs in here that I deleted that actually had balances? Okay. Watch what happens when I refresh this. When I refresh this, it automatically wrote that formula down there. Okay. So it will always then, once we set up a calculated column, it will always do that. So this then is going to be my job to date cost as of the last month end. And this is the first part of the cost number that we need. Okay. So any questions so far on that?
There doesn't seem to be any questions.
Okay. Well, of course, nothing in life can be that easy. Okay. And one of the problems is I asked you a second question. This job to date cost number, does that truly represent the job to date cost on my job? And the answer is no, it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is that Sage accumulates costs for the main job in one bucket, and it accumulates costs for any extras on the job in another bucket. So let's go back. I'm going to delete this column for a second. Let's go back in to the table and we're going to edit it. Okay. I'm going to go back down to the job table. And I'm, okay. This time, instead of going to job 1, I'm going to go to job 2. Okay. And I'm going to go down to the extra columns, all the way down the bottom here. And what you're going to see is that there is a column that is called job to date extras, job to date cost. And there's one called extras next month cost. And those are separate accumulating buckets that it uses to track the cost for extras and for next month. And as you can see in this case, we actually have a extra cost for one of our jobs, the Clackamas Office Park. Number 4, we have 175,000 job to date cost in the main job, and we have another 7,500 in the extras. So once again, if I'm going to calculate this and try to tie it back to my GL, what I have to do is I have to get my job to date cost, add my extra cost, and then I need to subtract out the next month cost for the main job and the next month cost for the extra. And that will give me the number that will reconcile back into my general ledger. So in this case, I'll go over here and I'm going to say equal, get job to date cost plus I want you to add the extra cost. Then I want you to take out the next month cost. And then I want you to take out the extra cost for next month. And that, if you want to call it, for lack of a better word, we can call, this is our accounting cost. This is the number that we will reconcile back into the general ledger. Okay. And what I would actually do in this case is I would just hide these. And now every month when I go to generate that, okay, that will tell me what my accounting cost will be for each of those jobs. Okay. Anybody have any questions on that?
There doesn't seem to be any questions.
Okay, so if I go back here, I've got to get rid of this one. This is my old. If I go back here to I actually wrote this then. This is what we just went through. So you have to take the amount from the job plus the amount from the extra, and you have to take out the next month cost from the job and the next month cost from the extra. And that will give you the balance that you're going to be reconciling back into the general ledger. So we just did the one for job cost, job to date cost. We also have to do that for the revised contract field. The revised contract field works the same way. We have to pick up revised contract amount plus revised contract, revised amount from the extra, minus next month approved changes from the job record, minus next month approved changes from the extras, okay? So in all of the fields that we're bringing over, we're not just bringing over one field, we're bringing over 4 fields and then adding and subtracting them to get the number that we need, okay? And this is probably the biggest single concept you have to realize, okay? Is that what we need to do, okay? The only 2 that you don't need to do that on, as you're going to see, is you don't need to do that on the month-to-date cost and the month-to-date work bill, which are 2 that we're going to bring over. And the reason we don't need those is those are always, they never have next month cost in them. They only have the current month, and they clear out whenever you close job cost, okay? So what we need to do is, in order for us to do our WIP schedule, we need to bring over contracts, we need to bring over billings, we need to bring over costs, we need to bring over month-to-date build, year-to-date build, month-to-date cost, and year-to-date cost. And to do that, we have to bring over a whole bunch of columns. Okay? Now, there's 2 ways of doing it. The one way of doing it is doing it exactly as we did it right here. And this is going to be the way that I'm going to suggest that you do it, even though it's not very pretty, okay? Because this is the easier way of doing it, okay? Over here in this table, you will notice that I can tell you that that's my revised contract amount, okay? That is my revised contract from the job plus my revised contract from the extra, minus the next month amounts. The reason you see it's labeled extra here, or EXPR1, expression. And the reason is there's 2 ways I can do it. I can either bring all of this back and I can do the math inside of Excel, or if I wanted to be a little cleaner, I could actually do all of this math inside of the query, okay? I could actually do this, say, get this, add that, subtract that, just bring that back, okay? And the reason I don't suggest people do that their first time is it's a little clunky to do. I'm going to show you how to do one of the fields right now, and you'll see why it's a little bit of a problem. I'm going to go and I'm going to create another sheet. And this time we'll do the math actually in the query. So I'm going to go to Get Data. Okay. I'm going to go to Other Sources, Microsoft Query. We're going to go back to Job Cost. Okay. I'm going to go back down and I'm going to pick up some columns. Just bear with me a second here. Here we go. In this case, right now, I'm only going to bring back job and description. I'm not going to bring back any of the amounts. Instead of coming right back this time, when I got to this last step, it says, what do I want to do? Do I want to bring this back? Do I want to bring this data straight back into Excel, or do I want to mess with it a little bit? In this case, we're going to mess with it a little bit. I'm going to view this data in Microsoft Query. And Microsoft Query is the query program that is built into the back end of Excel, and it is what's actually bringing the data back into Excel. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with Access or are familiar with Access, you're gonna notice that this thing looks very, very similar to what the query designer looks like in Access database. And it is. It's kind of a dumbed down version of that. Okay. It's kind of a dumbed down version. And unfortunately, it's not a very easy program to use. It doesn't scroll very well. So what I can do is, let's go down to job to date cost. Okay. And if you remember, we also had a next month cost. We're going to go back up here. We're going to go to next month. Okay. Okay. If I just return the data right now, it'll bring it back just like that. It'll bring back them in each column. But what I can do if I want, I'm going to go back into the query. I can actually create a column over here, and I can say, add job to date cost. Well, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to go right here. Bear with me for a second, guys. I'm using a slightly different version of the driver here, so my instructions. I can get job to date cost plus next month cost. And it'll actually add them together for me. And then if I want, I can delete those and it'll just bring it back to me in one column. Okay. Do you see how it has expression on it? Okay. The problem that you have in building it is that you have to tag 4 columns for each value, and the column names get very, very long. It takes a lot of typing. So what I've done, while I've done that here, you don't need to do that. You can do the cheap man's way, which is what we just showed you over here. You just add it all up and then just hide the columns. Okay. Yeah. So in order for our thing to work, we have to bring back from each of the fields. We need to bring back. Let me see if I have my list here. Okay. We bring back the following. We are bringing back the job number, the job name, the job status. We need to get the revised contract amount. We need the work build, job to date, month to date, and year to date. And we need the cost, job to date, month to date, and year to date. Okay. All of this information we can retrieve automatically from Sage. Okay, so we should never be entering it into our Excel schedule. We can get it. We just have to add up the right columns. Okay. The only thing then that we have to maintain on our sheet is projected cost, because that's not in the system. That is what we get from our project managers every month. And we do have to keep track of the prior period amounts that have been reported in earnings and costs in prior periods, because we have to be able to reconcile the month to date and the year to date earnings. Okay. Okay. So now that we have done this, now that we have put this all together, okay, how do we roll it forward? How do we deal with that? Yeah. Well, first off, does anybody have any questions at this point?
There are no questions right now.
Okay. Okay. I wish I had a little thing to see if everybody could tell me that I've lost them or not. Okay. So let's go then to the next stage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip back from the template. I'm going to go back to this one. Yeah. So in the template, this is what this is basically the table that we're going to build. Okay. You're going to have a lot more columns, but you're going to add everything up in the contracts, add everything up in billings, add everything up in cost, month to date, year to date billed, month to date cost, year to date cost. Okay. Ignore this column right now. Okay. Now, one of the other things then, we talked about a little bit about working directly on the tables as they came in from Sage. Now, the reason that we can't work on this table is, once again, this table, I could, for instance, just do a column over here, and I could say, well, what I want on this column is I want to get my contract amount less my billings, okay? And that would be my amount to bill. Okay. The problem with that is that it's hard to work on these tables because, once again, these tables are always expanding and contracting, okay? Maybe last month, our table only looked like that, and the rest of these are all brand new jobs, okay? So it's very tough sometimes to deal with that. So how we're going to do it is, we're not going to work on this table. What we're going to do is we're going to set up our WIP on another sheet, and then we're going to pull the data forward to do that. So the first step that we have to do, we've now brought our data back. Okay, let me get rid of this. The first thing I want to do to help me is I want to name the table. Okay. So when you first bring a table back into Excel, I'm going to go over here, I'm going to data, and I'm just going to bring back any table. I don't really care what it is. Other sources, we're going to grab first thing we can get our hands on, okay? You can tell I've got quite a few data sources. We use it quite a bit, okay? Actually, let me bring back a table that we can add. So we'll go to vendors for sake of argument. Actually, we'll just go to vendor for sake of argument. I'm going to do vendor name, and then I'm going to go year to date amount. Okay. When we first bring a table back of any kind into an Excel spreadsheet, it gets named by Excel. Excel names it something, okay? If I click on the table, anywhere on the table, you will see up on the ribbon, this design option opens up. If I'm not on a table, design isn't there. But if I'm on a table, design is. And you're going to notice all the way over here, there's a table name. And it will always be this very cryptic table query, something that has a number to it, okay? It's the way that it names it. The first thing that we want to do whenever we bring an ODBC query back is we want to name the table something useful. Now, in this case, I did vendor, okay? So I brought back vendor. So I'm going to call this table AP vendors, okay? So now when I click on it, you're going to see the name is AP vendors, okay? Likewise, if I click on this table over here, you will see that I have named this table active jobs, okay? Now, why am I naming the tables? Well, one of the reasons that I want to name the tables is it makes writing the formulas for these tables very, very easy. So I'm going to show you right now. Remember how we said earlier, let's assume that I want to add up costs. I want to add up the cost for all the jobs in this table. Well, I really can't do this. Okay. Well, it's going to convert it over. Let's assume for a second that last row wasn't there. I really can't do this because the problem is this reference in here is going to change. As this table gets bigger and smaller, the reference that I have to add is going to change. But because I've named it, okay, what I can now do is I can use what's called structure query. I can say equal, okay, I want you, if I type in A and it gives me all the formulas that begin with A, you will now see that down on the list, there is something called active table. It says, hey, Mike, you have a table out there called active jobs. Is there something you want to do with it? Yep, there is something I want to do with it. What I want to do is, I'm going to do a square left mark. I want you to bring back, in this case, it's expression. We'll get into that in a second. The value for that first column in the contracts. I'm sorry. I didn't put a sum on it. There you go. You see how that now equals that. And the nice thing about that is it doesn't make a difference how the table shrinks or not. Whenever the table gets refreshed, because I used a table reference and I didn't use a cell reference, it will always bring me back the correct number. It will let it grow or shrink accordingly. So that's why naming tables and learning how to use this structured reference is so important, okay? Now, you may ask, well, Mike, I added up the contract column, but you added something called expression here. What gives? Well, what gives is this. If you actually notice, there's a hidden row here. Remember, when I bring a calculated column back from query, if I'm doing the addition at the query level, it'll bring it back. It'll always name the column expression, expression 1, expression 2, expression 3, expression 4, okay? If I want that to return something other than, we call it something other than expression, I have two options. The first option is I could actually tell it to do that in the ODBC query. I can say, add these 4 columns up, and then when you return the column, I want you to name it contract instead of expression 1. The problem with that is that's a more advanced ODBC technique. Once you do that particular modification, you can no longer use the query editor to add or subtract things to the query. And so as a result, I did not do it here because I knew we were going to be working with this query in the class. So the other way that you can do it is you can just, the row above the table, you can put in whatever you want everything to be. And then you could just hide that row, okay? Whoops. And so the table looks like that first contract, that first column is actually called contract, but it's actually not, it's called expression 1. And so when I'm using my table references, if I haven't renamed my tables, I have to use whatever the table column is that it came back. If I try to change that up here, if I try to call it contract, okay, what'll happen is next time I refresh, it just goes right back. Okay, so that's the reason that I did that. Okay, so the more advanced one, if I knew I was done with this, I would actually rename my columns, but I haven't done it here. Okay, so let's go how we work with this then. Oops, I'm going to hide this. Okay, so we're going to go over here. We're going to go to this WIP schedule. So what I've done on the WIP schedule is I'm going to create a line here. I'm going to create a brand new line. Okay. I'm just going to make some space here, and we're going to write a formula. Okay. So what I want somebody to do is I want it when somebody puts a job number here. What I want to do is I want to be able to fill in all this information. And I know this information all exists back in this active jobs table, okay? I just need to bring it forward. Yeah. So let's take a look at the Northwest Food Warehouse. Well, the first thing I want to do is if I put a job number here, I want to bring back the job name. Okay. So the job name is in the second column of the active jobs table. Okay. It will always be in the second column. So what I can do is I can use something called a VLOOKUP formula. And a VLOOKUP formula works like this: equal VLOOKUP. Okay. The first thing is, what do I want to go looking for? Okay, I want to go looking for a job number, which is in C8. Okay, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to fix that C column for later, comma. What I want you to do is I want you to go look through, and if I start typing in active AC, I want you to go look through the active jobs table, and I want you to look down the very first column of the active jobs table. And when you find that value, I want you to bring back the values from the second column. And that happens to be Northwest Food Warehouse, okay? Now, if I change that, and that's exactly right. It went here, it went down here, it found that, and it brought back that value. If instead I had put in 03011, it would bring back Cordova Middle School. Okay. Likewise, I want the status is in the third column, contract is in the fourth column. Okay, so I can go over and I can copy this formula and I can say, bring back what's in the third column and bring back what's in the fourth column. Oh, that's because Cordova Middle School doesn't have a contracting system yet. I was wondering why it was returning. If we go back here and do 03, that's 022, it will be back unadjusted. So what I did here on each of these rows is I just used VLOOKUPs to retrieve the data that I need. So this is coming from the table, this is coming from the table, this is coming over from the table. This is just getting this and taking out that. This is coming from the table. This is a formula based on that. Build the data is coming from the formula. So basically, all of these are coming over from the table, or if they're not coming over from the table, they're being calculated as amounts coming off the table. Okay. And so if I need to add a new job, if a new job comes in during the month, okay, the only thing that I have to do on my table here is I just have to copy a row and put in the new job number. Okay, and it will automatically bring over. All I have to do is clear out this, and I have to clear out, whatever I copied over. If I didn't have a blank row that I always copied over, I'd always have to be copying out the stuff from the job I copied from. And it will give me the information that is coming over from my TL active jobs. Yeah. So you guys kind of see that that's the concept that we're talking about here. There's nothing magical about it. I'm literally bringing everything over in one table. Okay. So any questions so far?
Yes, there is a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are the projected costs the same as the estimate out of job cost?
No. Good question. The projected cost in this are what we so in this particular example, we're using the percentage completion method. And percentage completion method, we are basically looking at the costs that we've incurred to date, less the projected cost that we believe we're going to have on the job. And then we're using that ratio to recognize our income. Okay. So the projected cost number is always going to be the latest and greatest cost number that we have for that job, which probably will not be the estimate. Okay. So that number you do have to put in. Okay, good question. Any other questions?
Nope, there are no other questions.
Okay. So there are, however, there is one other clinker that I've got to throw into the system. Okay. And that is when I did this initial job or this initial thing here, okay, what happened if I brought all the jobs that I had in the system back here? Okay, if I brought all the jobs in the system in, likely this would not tie out to my general ledger. And the reason it won't turn out to my general ledger is this. Okay, well, I can't say just include open jobs because a job may have closed the previous month. We could have costs that came in on a closed job that hit our GL that if I just ran this for open jobs would not be included. So in that last example where I told you we have to add up all of those, I'm going to go back here to my PowerPoint. Remember when I told you we had to add up all these fields to get them to work? The other thing that we do have to do is we have to filter the table because there are only certain jobs, okay? Let me see if I've got it. I did put it here. You just have to bear with me. Okay. I hope I put it in the, I did. Oh my gosh, guys, I did not put it in here. Okay, I did not put it in here. That's a big mistake on my part. Okay, so the jobs that I bring up, okay, one of the things, well, most likely than not, if we have a job that is in progress, okay, that is a job that is going to be on our WIP schedule, okay. Likewise, if we have a job that's unstarted, it needs to be on our WIP schedule. But the other thing is, we have to have, what happens if we have a cost or an amount that bills that comes in, and when it comes on a closed job. So let's say that I have a wrap-up cost that came in. Now, people do this in different ways. I know some companies that once a job closes, they never post it to the job again. It goes to separate wrap-up accounts. Most of the companies I've seen, it still goes to the job. Well, if that job is closed and it's not on here, I can't do it by status because I can get it and it will throw, this will no longer agree to my general ledger. So what I have to do is I have to filter only for specific jobs, okay? And that is fairly important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click. I'm sorry, I thought I had this on a slide. This is actually a fairly important one. My apologies. Okay. 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 And what I have to do is I have to say, this is my criteria pane. And my criteria pane is basically saying two things. It is saying, okay, I want you to bring back all jobs that aren't closed. So if they're not closed, then I want you to bring them back. Whether they've got activity or not, probably want to see them on the schedule. But the other thing is, I want you to bring back any job, whether it's opened or closed, okay, that has had any year-to-date work billed or any year-to-date cost incurred. Okay, because if there has been any year-to-date activity on it, then it is going to show up somewhere on my general ledger. And if I'm going to reconcile this into my general ledger, then I have to take those out. So actually, my apologies, I did not give you this in the PowerPoint. I actually must have deleted the slide last night because I actually wrote this formula for you. So what I will do this is, Barclay, I will get you a revised copy of the PowerPoint on this, and it will have that formula in it because that is a crucial formula. Okay.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yeah, so the two keys to bringing this back is you have to know how to add all the columns up, and then you also have to know just to filter for the jobs, anything that's not closed, and if it's closed, you have to include it if it's had any year-to-date activity of either cost or billing. That way, we'll always agree to your general ledger. Okay. Now, any questions so far? I know we've covered a lot of stuff, and it's a little bit hard sometimes because I can't exactly tell if you're with me or not on it, but do we have any questions so far?
No questions so far.
Okay. So I hate to tell you guys, we're not going to get, we have 15 minutes left. Okay. Now I mentioned to you before, if we just bring this over, okay, and we just do this, and we don't do anything with the reconciliation, I think we may have had a good start with you, because I think you can use this technique to bring these things over so that you don't have to type them into the system. But I want to show you a couple other little kickers that we can do here, okay? And these I find to be very helpful when doing these with ODBC. So one of the things that's going to happen in ODBC all the time, okay, is that we're constantly adding jobs. And so the only downside, the only thing that we need to do in this particular schedule, if we just look at active jobs and we just look at the WIP schedule, is whenever I refresh this, the one thing that I do need to do is I do need to make sure I have to have an easy way to identify, is there a job that is now on this schedule that is not on this schedule? Because if there is, I have to add that job in. I have to copy a row and I have to add the job number, okay? Now in this particular case, it's not too hard, okay? Because we don't have that many jobs, but in life, we have a lot more jobs, and I'm not gonna have somebody sit here and go through and compare these two lists. There's gotta be a quicker, easier way of doing it, and actually there is. So I'm gonna show you then, this is the quick trick to identifying brand new jobs that are not on your schedule, okay? So over here, what I'm gonna do here is we're gonna delete a couple jobs, okay? We're gonna delete a couple jobs here. So that, let's say those were not on the schedule last month, okay? And let's assume also that I made a boneheaded move and I actually put one of these jobs in twice, okay? That I have Cordova Middle School in twice. I actually missed it. Actually, let's not do Cordova. Let's get one that's got some activity on it. There, Metro Bus Stop. Okay. So we have now refreshed this. Okay. We have now refreshed this and we data and we have our brand new data and it's all come back. Yeah. There you go. It's all brand new data. Of course, none of the numbers changes. So what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to delete this so we can read it. I'm going to create another formula. Okay, and we're going to use a really simple formula, and the formula is, it's a count if formula. Okay, and a count if, what a count does is it says equal count if. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go look at a range. I'm going to go over here to my WIP schedule, and I'm going to tag column C right there. I want you to go look through column C, comma, and I want you to count how many times a certain value occurs in column C. In this case, I'm going to say that that value is that job amount in that row. Okay. So I'm going to count if, I'm going to go through the WIP schedule, I'm going to go down column C, and if I find the job, I want you to count how many times that job is there. When I hit enter, because I'm doing it immediately to the right of the last column, it's going to make a calculated column. Okay. And what you're going to see is, I'm going to reformat this so it's a normal number. Okay. What you're going to see is any job that has a 1 is on that schedule, and any job that doesn't have a 1, okay, needs to be added. So in this case, I know that these jobs right here, these are the ones that I need to add. Okay, so I could just go right over here, copy some rows in the middle. Whoops. I'm just going to add a bunch of them. Okay. I can just go back here. I can get these jobs, 1, 2, 3, 4, right here. Just copy them, right click, copy. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to paste the values. And it's going to bring all my new jobs over. Okay. And there you have it. I now have all of my jobs. I didn't have to go and I didn't have to look anything. COUNTIF is an interesting little formula. You can use it very often to quickly compare tables to see something that is in one table that is not in another table. The other thing you can also do is you can use it to double check to see whether you have something in there twice.
Excuse me, Mike.
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know that there's 10 minutes left of the session.
Okay. So unfortunately, we don't have time to kind of get into the next section of this, but what we're doing is, I think as we kind of told you, we're kind of walking you through the concept on this. So if this is something that you're interested in, here is what I will do. These spreadsheets that I'm showing you, I do have these spreadsheets, and I do have the some instruction material that goes with them. If it's something that you want me to send you along, I will. Now, if you are part of the, 57% of the class that has had no ODBC experience, you're probably going to get a little bit lost in these input ranges. Okay, but if you have some basic understanding of this, just having this schedule to look at and to fiddle around with it, you'll quickly find out the logic to it. It's a lot more complicated than it looks. But basically what I'm just doing is bringing in job information, recasting it on a WIP schedule. I'm bringing in GL information and I'm comparing it to the WIP schedule to see whether everything's in place. And then I'm creating a WIP entry. And even if you didn't have these two, if all you really had time to do was develop your schedule, or then you want to use a consultant to do the other ones, then basically you can do it. But I can tell you, we use this every month. We do not type anything in. The only thing that we ever type in is what our projected cost there can be. Okay. So let me do one other thing. Let me show you, because we're not going to be able to do these, I do want to show you a couple other little kickers with job cost that you will want to be amazed, or that you will want to be informed of. So one of the questions that we do have is, we have to get these projected cost numbers for people. Okay. And so one of the real common ways that people do that is they will produce for a job, they will go and they will produce a worksheet for their superintendent, and they will go get the data from the job. Okay. I want to point this out to people. This is a very common one that I see. Okay. Current sample data. Okay. I'm going to go over and we're going to go to job, master job. Okay. Job description. I'm just going to say total estimate right there. And we're going to go over job to day cost. Okay. And I'm just going to bring it back for one job right now. Okay, I'm going to say equals job equals 03001. Okay. Let's say that I have I'm sorry guys, I went to the wrong thing. I went to job and should have gone to cost code. My apologies. There we go. And There's two things I want to point out when we do this. We want to get a cost code. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to be able to give our superintendent the total estimate. And I'm just pulling two numbers here. You'd probably give him a little bit more, but we're just going to give him this for the job. Okay. Okay. And what we're going to tell him is what we want you to do is we want you to put a value right here. Okay. Okay. Fill this in. Okay. Balance to complete. Okay. And projected cost. And so we've now created a little spreadsheet that we can give to our tenant, or give to our superintendent, that he could fill that out, projected cost. And what he can do is he can sit here and he could put his cost numbers in and it will add them up. Okay, well, if you've done basic ODBC, there's nothing funky about this, but I want to point something out. The first thing is, do you see where it says job to date cost here? If I go all the way to the bottom of this table and I add up my job to date costs, it's telling me right now that I've got total job to date cost of $1,514,000. Okay, is that number correct? And no, that number is not correct. And the reason that number is not correct is that unless you tell it otherwise, when you return cost codes, it is returning the phase cost code, in this case electric, and all of the children cost codes as well, electric sub. Likewise, up here in equipment, it's duplicating my my food storage equipment. So if you are going to use schedules like this with your superintendents, what you have to do is you have to take the group cost codes out. And the way you take the group cost codes out is when you bring this back. Okay. There actually is a field that is called group cost code, master cost code, group cost code right there. Okay. And what you want to do is you want to make sure the group cost code I think it's 0 if I'm not mistaken. Oh, I'm sorry, that only brought back my group cost codes. It's 1. Okay, because otherwise it will always be twice as much as it's supposed to be. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're going to give that to your superintendent, that will take all the group cost codes off of the the schedule to give him. Okay. The other thing that I will do very quickly, because we've only got 2 whole minutes, is the other problem we have with what I just gave you is that, well, I have to print this for a lot of different jobs. Okay. I want to be able to do this on the side. I want to be able to decide the job on the fly. And the way that you can do that, and we get into some other classes, is you can use a prompt query. What a prompt query is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to modify this query. Okay. And when I do that, I have to go to Microsoft Query to do it. So in query, this is what my query looks like. And you see up here in the criteria field, it says I'm only bringing back jobs right now that have that value. If I want to change that value on the fly, what I can do is I can do a left parentheses and I put some text in, enter job number. Okay. And now when I move off that field, it's going to say enter a job number. And I can type it. If I type in another job number, it will redo the query for that job number. Now, where this gets really, really fun is when I bring it back here, if I right click on this query and I go down to table, there's something down here called parameters. And it knows that I just put a parameter query in that definition. What I can do is I could link it to a cell. And I can say, anytime you change that cell, I want you to rerun the query. So in this case, if I want to produce this for this job, or this job, or this job, all I've got to do is change that field and produce that for my superintendent. So a good starting point, if you're not giving your superintendent stuff in Excel spreadsheets, this is a down and dirty way. It's not pretty. There's a lot nicer ways to make it look, but it's a good down and dirty way that you can get them to do the projected cost. Okay. Guys, we're a minute over. I'm terribly sorry we ran out of time. It was probably a little bit ambitious to try. I think we're going to cover it all in an hour and 45 minutes, but hopefully you've come up with some, I've shown you some interesting concepts, giving you something to think about. And I'm going to tell you, keep at it, because you can do this and you can do it without having to retype data. I can tell you because we do it every month, and trust me, we're not brain surgeons. So I do appreciate you guys taking the time and spending the afternoon with me, and good luck, and hope you got something out of it. So nice talking with you.
We do have one question.
Oh, yes.
Will we get the generic Excel file that you have been working in so we can look at formulas and other info?
Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send everybody over. If what they would like is I will send over the complete version, this Excel, this thing right here. I will send this over. Okay. Now, it won't work on your machine because this is linked up to the Timberline data file. So none of these input ranges are going to work on your machine. These would all have to be redone so that they point to your machine. But what it will do is it will show you how I did all of these formulas. Okay. And that is really the important thing. Okay. So I will send that all over. And my contact information is there. If you have any issues on it, just give me a call. Like I said, we deal with this kind of stuff all the time. And if you have anything, just let me know. We'd love to give it a shot.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. And once again, thank you all for spending some of your time over the last couple of days with us. We do want your feedback and would like to continue to bring you information you find valuable. So please send that in to us at clientcare@onpoint-software.com. Also keep an eye out for a survey over the next few days. We have additional information on our website, which is onpoint-software.com. Also, if you come up with additional questions for Mike, like he said, you can send those over as well. Also, if you have, hopefully you've gotten a lot out of this. If you could like us on LinkedIn and on Facebook, and you'll be able to keep up to date with further classes that we're doing and further events. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Everybody have a great afternoon and great weekend.